This is Boom Bust, broadcasting around the world from right here in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Boom Busters. And coming up, we'll talk energy and economics with an emphasis on plans to almost triple the capacity of a key Canadian pipeline. Plus, there are concerns about pipelines at the center of the U.S. shale boom, which appears to be having growing pains. RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich and David Greenberg, the CEO of Greenberg Capital, joins us to discuss. Plus, Puerto Rico went dark, as in all the island lost power yesterday, raising increasing concerns about the energy on the island. One Puerto Rican, Mayor Maria Melendez, gives us her take on the troubling circumstances. And recent report says that 2/3 of millennials have nothing saved for their retirement. Economist Richard Wolff joins us to discuss. All that just ahead, but first we head to some headlines. The European Union is offering a revived and truncated version of TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, as a vehicle for a broader agreement with the United States on tariffs and policy toward China. The quid pro quo in the arrangement would involve Europe granting quicker access for U.S. beef and lower tariffs on cars and machinery imported from the United States, and supporting U.S. complaints against China before the World Trade Organization and on matters related to intellectual property disputes. The U.S., for its part, would be expected to make Europe's temporary exemption from aluminum and steel tariffs permanent. France is reportedly resisting the deal in hopes of pushing the U.S. to re-enter the Paris Climate Accord. The latest edition of the Federal Reserve's so-called Beige Book, released yesterday, reports that businesses across the United States are encountering significantly higher prices for steel in the wake of President Trump's announcement on steel import tariffs. The increase in prices occurred across all 12 of the federal regional districts of the Federal Reserve, but one company's pain can be another's profit. Steelmaker Nucor reported first quarter profits of $354 million on a 15% increase in revenue and a 9% increase in the average price per ton of steel. In the latest turn of U.S. sanctions against Russia, Germany is asking the United States for exemptions for German companies. Big-name German companies with major interest in Russia and ties to the specific business people and companies named in these sanctions include Volkswagen, Daimler, and Siemens, while the lobbying group for 655 German metals companies says the German auto parts plants could face shortages as a result of U.S. sanctions. The small but no longer trivial prospect of a German recession is also pushing German businesses to ask Chancellor Angela Merkel's government to protect them from becoming collateral damage in the U.S.-Russia tit-for-tat trade war. Trade between Russia and Germany increased 57.2 billion euros in 2017. That's up 48 billion from 48 billion the year before. In more quarterly earnings news, this time in the credit card sector, American Express has posted their second highest quarterly profit ever. Amex says their Q1 profits totaled $1.63 billion, up from $1.25 billion a year ago. And like the banks we reported on yesterday, American Express's bottom line was helped by the Trump tax cuts, which reduced the credit card giant's effective tax rate from 32% to 21.5%. Meanwhile, competitors Visa and MasterCard are partnering to create a single payment button for online purchases. The button would replace Visa's Checkout and MasterPass and could be available before the end of this year. In Canada, the controversy surrounding a major oil pipeline is not going away. Texas-based Kinder Morgan says investment in the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline may be untenable as this Canadian provincial and federal governments face off on the issue. RT's Alex Mihailovich joins us in Toronto, where he's following the story. Alex, Kinder Morgan says it might be stepping back from the project, which could actually triple the pipeline capacity. What's the latest?
Well, Kinder Morgan saying this is beyond their realm. The Texas-based company just sees this as a argument right now between governments, with the BC, the British Columbia government, being in the center of it all. The British Columbia government in particular is the one that has been putting up hurdles towards this project. It's concerned about the fact that this pipeline actually goes mostly through British Columbia and through some of the most pristine areas of the world. And of course, pipeline leaks are a major concern for a new Democratic Party government. They're more left-leaning here in Canada, and a government that's more concerned with the environment. So what Kinder Morgan is saying here is that this is not about us. This is about the Alberta government, the British Columbia government, and the federal government in Canada. We really don't have much to say in this argument, and they have actually shown some moves forward, or shall I say backwards, when it comes to this pipeline. Kinder Morgan earlier this month had slowed down construction, and they're saying if they don't get a clear sign by May 31st that this is going to go forward, well, they might just step out of this altogether.
So they're pretty much dealing with different signals from the provincial governments and the federal government. I mean, how are the governments trying to cooperate, or are they, Alex?
Well, when you look at John Horgan, he's the leader of the British Columbia NDP. He's the one that's basically, as I mentioned, he's putting most of the hurdles up, as well as the British Columbia as a province. I mean, they're not too keen on seeing this capacity go for 300,000 barrels a day up to 890,000. That's almost triple capacity. And as I mentioned, some of the most pristine areas of the world. When you have that much oil flowing, of course, then the risks of a spill happening just increase. And it's not only about the mountains that this pipeline is going through, it's where it ends. And that's in the Pacific Ocean. There would be more tanker traffic happening there, and with more tankers, of course, there's more risk of oil spills. So that's the British Columbia side of the equation. As for Alberta, where the tar sands are, well, they want to push this thing through as soon as possible, and they have the Canadian government backing them on this. The question is right now, and what the British Columbia government's doing is they're trying to push through a court reference. They're filing with the courts to see how much power they actually have here to stop this thing, or with any mega project that crosses provincial boundaries. Now, Rachel Notley, the Premier of Alberta, has said, you know what? We'll pay for this project. It's probably the worst negotiating technique ever when you're talking to a private company. And Prime Minister Trudeau has also said now that they're willing to they're willing to pay for it. So who's they? That would be the Canadian taxpayer or the Alberta taxpayer, but somehow they think that their pockets are somehow involved in this. One big move, though, by Alberta earlier this week, what they did is that they're trying to push through slowing down the flow of oil to the Vancouver area, which comes through the Kinder Morgan pipeline. That's about 60% of the refined oil they get in that area, and that would also affect Oregon and Washington State. Prices would go up. Is this a good idea, or is this just dirty business right now? That's up to the public, and the public in British Columbia has not been pleased with the way this has been moving, and for Alberta to do something like that, and if the feds actually support this move, well, you can be sure there's going to be a lot of people in British Columbia and those two northern states that are not going to be very happy.
You're always right on top of it, Alex. Thank you. And joining our conversation from Fort Lauderdale is David Greenberg, the president of Greenberg Capital. David, thanks for being with us again. The U.S. shale boom,
my pleasure.
It's really, as you know, about the Permian Basin, right, which is located in West Texas, some in New Mexico. The Permian's output is on track to compete with the likes of Iran and Iraq. It has helped increase U.S. production to all-time highs. But new reports are that there may be some growing pains regarding pipelines also there. What is the predicament with the pipeline pains in the Permian?
Well, the whole shale boom kind of reminds me of the gold rush back in the day. And when you had all those people going out and, you know, everyone's looking out for the gold, they're short on pans, they're short on everything. And what's happening now, too, out there is that it's kind of like a victim of their own success, because there's so much coming out, but the pipelines don't have the capacity to hold it, and they can't be built fast enough right now. And then when you bring in all the stuff that's happening with the tariffs, it can put another twist on it.
And what do you think? I mean, you're an oil trader, traded at NYMEX for years. What do you think? Might this have some impact on prices, David, or is that really more about Syrian conflict in the Middle East?
Yeah, I don't really think that oil that has never hit the market yet is going to affect the price as we speak. In time, when this does grow and they'll get rid of the speed bumps and they're going to get the pipelines in and they're going to get the right production levels to where they need to be, if that was then cut back, then yes, I would say that that was leading towards a spike in crude. However, oil that's projected to be out there before it even is, I don't think that is really affecting the market, nor will it affect the market for some time.
It reminds me, David, of back in the day, I don't know, 2010 or so, when some of the large banks actually held oil off the shore in the port of Houston before they brought it in. So to your point, until it actually enters the market, right?
Right. I will never forget flying into Kennedy one day when crude oil was spiking at all-time highs, and I'm literally flying in on the jet and going over into the ocean with the West Texas Intermediate and the New York Harbor heating oil. All you saw was tanker after tanker after tanker sitting on the coast. Or just what they did in Brent many years ago when they sent their tankers to China, ran up the price, then turned them around and came back. So until it hits the market and then take it off, it's really not going to make much of a difference.
And Alex, are these sorts of bottlenecks that we're talking about with pipelines, are they taking place anywhere else around the world?
Yeah, I'll tell you, some place that's taking place is Canada. Same thing. We had that same type of issue. A lot of stuff in the tar sands that can come out, not enough pipeline capacity. But this is all a part of something that could lead to a perfect storm. You look at a country like Venezuela that's actually lowering capacity because it's falling apart. So when you have countries like Canada and the States that can produce more, but there's a slowdown because of a lack of infrastructure, that can trickle down year over year to the point that what we see right now, what many people are talking about, is this lower demand for oil. So if you're not getting the capacity out there that you have, that can also push demand to be lowered, just as it would in the sense that from environmental sense or from any other sense that we have other energy sources now that we're using.
RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich, and we also thank David Greenberg of Greenberg Capital. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And time now for a quick break, but stick around because when we return, we'll speak with economist and author Richard Wolff about how millennials are not saving for retirement and more. As we go to break, here are the numbers at the closing bell. It was a tough day in the markets. Bitcoin posts today, all green arrows on the board.
I'm a trial lawyer. I've spent countless hours pouring through documents that tell the story about the ugliest side of corporate America. Corporate media refuses to talk about these issues.
The conduct by this company was deplorable.
I'm going to paint a clear picture about how disturbing, how corrupt corporate conduct has become in modern America. These are stories that no one else can tell. I'm Mike Papantonio, host of America's Lawyer. Question more.
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
Welcome back. Indian tax authorities have raided 20 offices of Hardcastle Restaurants, McDonald's biggest Indian partner. Hardcastle, which manages McDonald's locations in the west and south of India, is reportedly suspected of tax evasion, though authorities have not yet disclosed, officially at least, the cause for the raid. This is the latest headache for McDonald's in their effort to break into the Indian market after a dispute with another domestic partner, Connaught Plaza, which is their de facto franchisee in the northern and eastern parts of the country. McDonald's has ordered Connaught to stop using the company's name, but the founder, Vikram Bakshi, is holding out for a higher buyout price. And returning to the U.S., online retailer Amazon is partnering with brick-and-mortar consumer electronics chain Best Buy to sell a new line of televisions that use Amazon's Fire TV operating system. The TVs will be made by Toshiba and carry the in-house Insignia brand, and Toshiba will stop making TVs that feature the Roku streaming television player. Best Buy already sells Amazon's Kindle Reader and Echo Personal Assistant, and in this new phase of their partnership, Best Buy will be allowed to sell their TVs on Amazon. The idea of the broke millennial has become a staple on reporting on that generation in the U.S., and according to recent research, there may be some truth to the cliche. Data shows that just over 2/3 of millennials, or more than 2/3, it's crazy, right, have nothing. They've not saved at all for retirement. Because wages are so low while the cost of higher education is rising, a significant number of younger workers are more concerned about protecting Social Security. While Social Security has been under fire since its creation under Franklin Roosevelt, president back in the 30s, now millennials are pushing back in support of the program. Millennial rapper Cardi B has even voiced her opinion on the subject, saying in a recent interview that FDR was, quote, the real Make America Great person, because if it wasn't for him, old people wouldn't even get Social Security. And while some may dismiss Cardi B, a few national politicians have taken note. For example, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders tweeted, Cardi B is right. He went on to say that we should work to strengthen Social Security. He also tweeted out a video reaffirming his support of Cardi B on this subject.
Cardi B is right. We have got to protect Social Security for all generations.
Both Senator Sanders and Cardi B are pretty popular with millennials in saying that we need to expand Social Security, but will that help those 2/3 of millennials who have nothing saved for their golden years? And here to discuss, we're joined by Richard Wolff, Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Professor, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. Millennials as a group are large, they're fairly well educated, and they are a diverse group, but they're having a tough time finding jobs, as you well know. Are they going to be on the short end of the stick when they get older and need to retire?
The way things are going now, the answer is an unequivocal yes, they are, and they know it. I think it's really important for people to understand that the whole new generation that is going to inherit this country, the leadership of it and the work that has to be done, this is a generation that has a deep-seated upset. It was promised the American dream, like we've been promising to many generations. They were told to go to school. They were told to take out debt to go to college and university, because it would get them the American dream. It's not there, they're not getting it, and this is causing them to make decisions and take steps that are changing the history of this country.
Professor, I'm curious. I mean, I remember when, I was younger and had a student loan, I had the decision between whether or not you pay the student loan or you save for retirement, and sort of the immediate thing was paying the student loan. But is that one of the reasons that millennials aren't saving? I mean, what are the reasons why they're not doing this that will protect them in their golden years?
Well, basically, it's a squeeze from both the side of income for those young people and, on the other side, the costs they have to bear. And you're right. The biggest single cost factor is the debts, the mountain of debts. We have imposed on this generation of young people a level of borrowing necessity to get a college degree, let alone more advanced graduate training, that we've never done to other generations. Here in the United States, we're piling on the debt, while in places like Germany and much of the rest of Europe, tuition is being reduced to zero, as it is, for example, in Germany, for everybody, Germans and foreigners studying there alike. So our young people have these huge debts. At the same time, the jobs, the wages you can get, the benefits you can get, the security of your job, the regularity, all of those have been diminished. So they're not able to earn the way they used to, but they have these enormous debts they have to service, and they're being squeezed between these two. And of course, one of the first things to go is saving for a future that looks so murky or grim, depending on where they sit.
You know, Professor, I've often thought that sort of a gateway drug, as it were, to credit card debt and debt in general for youngsters is when you're in college or near the end of college, you know, you're essentially sent a credit card and, you know, you don't have much money. Generally, college kids don't, and they start using it. I mean, they start off, I mean, forget about just the student loan. They start off in debt. They have this debt before they even have a job. But what would help the circumstance with regard to retirement, Professor? Employer matches, perhaps? Auto-enrollment into retirement programs? What sort of things should people be looking for?
I think you need to deal with the causes. You either have to reduce the need to borrow by providing higher education as a national resource, something you want young people to do. Don't put obstacles in their way so the price keeps going crazy and the borrowing is necessary. Don't give them those debts to begin with for college, and you've taken away one big factor. And the other one, there's no nice way to say this, is stop paying bad wages. Stop giving jobs where the hours are insecure, where you're not sure 1 week from the next. You're training an entire generation to be unable to plan for the future because they don't think they can. And then they're going to learn, and many of them are beginning, like Carly B., that if you think you can retire on what Social Security pays you, you're in for yet another shock. And that's why so many of them are not just critical of their own situation. They're beginning to ask basic questions about the capitalist system we live in because it is giving them such a bad way to begin a life.
I get you 100%. And speaking about wages and jobs, you know, if you do end up getting a college degree, you're likely to have a better paying job, and that's something that certainly would be helpful in trying to pay the debt. But if you have to stay in a position, Professor, before you're quote-unquote vested with a retirement plan, you know, that could take years in some cases. And like you say, if you don't know if you're going to have the job for very long and they keep the hours below 40 hours, it means that you're sort of screwed with getting a retirement program, let alone any match. So is it really dependent upon us to change part of the system here, Professor?
Frankly, I don't see any way out that is short of that. I mean, let me add you a couple of factors. Around the United States today, many politicians, governors, mayors, state legislators, and so on, are attacking the pensions of public employees. It's a very popular thing to do. It's a way of avoiding having to pay these people whom you have promised a pension to, in some cases for 20 or 30 years, pensions to which those workers contributed their own money in part. If you continue to do this, you are sending a message to young people that their jobs in the public sector, and that's a major employer in America, but also jobs in the private sector, can't even rely on the little bit of pension support we still have because those are under assault too. So wherever you look, young people are coming to the conclusion there's no need for me to save for the future, even if I could, because it makes no sense. I'll never be able to get out of this burden of debt. I'll never be able, with the jobs I can get, to do that. So maybe I should just throw caution to the wind, live as well as I can now, and hope somehow something happens in the future. The problem is when the future arrives, and for many of them it'll not be that long, 5, 10, 15 years, we're going to face for the first time in many years a society of older people who will not be able to live without being burdens on their own children in a way that destroys families and can tear a society apart. That's why we're talking about a systemic problem showing up in a particular way in the millennial generation.
Tough medicine, Professor, but hopefully you will spur some people to action and to thinking more seriously about this. Richard Wolff, Professor of Economics, Emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, author, great guy, and we're very appreciative of you being here. Thanks so much, Professor.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about a really important issue.
On Wednesday, Puerto Rico lost power. The entire island, with a population of 3.3 million people, lost power. The blackout was triggered by a single electric line to the old and outdated electrical grid on the island, which has become exponentially worse as a result of last year's devastating hurricanes. The massive blackout as a result of Hurricane Maria last year caused 3.4 billion lost consumer hours on the island, which is more than the rest of the U.S. combined over 5 years. We were able to catch up with the mayor of one Puerto Rican town, Mayor Maria Melendez, who spoke to our producer about her take on the dire circumstances with regard to Puerto Rican energy. If you live in Puerto Rico and don't have the money to buy a power generator, then you'd be living in the dark. Wednesday morning, a disruption to a single power line brought the entire island's electricity production to a grinding halt.
There were no work in the stores, so the whole island was a shutdown just because the crane touched the line. A big line who stopped all the 7 areas, all the plants, energy plants.
Puerto Ricans rely on a single utility for their electricity called the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, or PREPA. It used to be entirely Puerto Rican-owned until Governor Ricardo Rosselló began selling off PREPA's debt little by little in the form of guaranteed bonds. Mayor Maria Melendez of Ponce, Puerto Rico, is worried that privatizing the only source of energy will lead to a worse economy.
Citibank is, or the stakeholders are the one who own those bonds from PEPA. The people of Puerto Rico have to know that. So the House of Representatives and the Senate are the ones who are checking that. And we, the mayors, we are the one who has to raise our voice.
The mayor said privatizing the island's energy sector could hinder other energy solutions.
People are constructing solar energy in their houses, but PREPA haven't gave them that they didn't have a permission from PEPA, and they pay the same rate of energy, even though they have solar energy on those panels in their houses.
Puerto Rico's debt has been a noose around the neck of the island for years, but in light of last year's hurricane, which devastated the island, there are increasing calls for federal government to step in and assist in paying that debt.
Even though there is an oversight control financial board in Puerto Rico, one of the alternatives will be forgiving the debt. One of the alternatives.
One thing is clear. Mayor Melendez believes that cheaper energy is the key to economic recovery.
PREPA knows it. The old system doesn't work. We have to change it. The cost is too high, and we need cheaper energy to get investment from the people, to get business in Puerto Rico.
But the first thing for the hurricane-ravaged island is protecting the island's infrastructure, which already exists. Mayor Melendez, however, is more worried about the island's preparedness as this year's hurricane season will soon begin.
I only hope God will throw us a hand and say there will be no hurricane. We have to be prepared.
That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Be sure to catch Boom Bust on YouTube, youtube.com/BoomBustRT. We'll catch you next time.